right, welcome. I'm Linus Wilson. We had an earlier live stream and it got disconnected. This is the Linus Wilson channel. We're covering the Game of Thrones here, and I briefly answered the most asked question on the web: Is the Night King a Targaryen? We'll go through that question just briefly. He is not a Targaryen as far as we know, right? We did see in the episode, you saw in the thumbnail, where Dany roasted the Night King with Drogon's Dragonfire really good, and the Night King did not die. He just walked right through it, and then he raised the dead. He did his little arm motion, and that was all kinds of problems for Dany and Jon, and thankfully Arya saved them all with her cat's paw dagger. Okay, so Targaryens can burn. Dany's the only one that can't burn, or that has shown evidence that she won't burn. That she, what does she do? She had two instances where she didn't burn, but her brother, got his brain kind of boiled by a golden crown of Drogon's. And then in the histories going back in the books, the Targaryens had a lot of them got burned up in the massacre at Somerville, or the tragedy at Somerville. So that's all I'd say about that. We're going to talk about some production leaks and maybe spoilers. There's this picture floating around of Jon and Cersei, supposedly from episode 4 in King's Landing. I think that's a misdirect. I think that's kind of on par. So last week, Vladimir Furyk, who plays the Night King, he had he showed a picture of him practicing swordplay with two swords. I guess like Darth Maul in the Star Wars movies, and that of course never came to pass. We got no swordplay from the Night King in episode 3. The Battle of Winterfell, aka the Long Night, is the official title, I guess, to tease the HBO series The Long Night. We got 2 days to go until the 4th and third to last episode. All the episodes from now on are about feature length, about 122 minutes, I think. 4 is not going to be a war. Is probably not going to have big battle scenes. But it's going to have, that's going to happen in episode 5 because Miguel Sapochnik's going to do episode 5. The biggest production leak I think there is to know who the director is. The director is going to be David Nutter this time. David Nutter's more does the talkie episodes. So the first 2 episodes were with David Nutter, and then the 6th episode is going to be with the little D&D, Dan and Dave. Are going to be the directors for that one, the showrunners. Somebody has kind of hinted that there's evidence that the guy that plays Rhaegal Targaryen, Jon's dad, who's dead in the series, never was in the series, but he married Lyanna in that secret ceremony. We saw that in a flashback with Brienne some time ago. That he was filming this last season, so maybe we'll see more of him. But I don't know if that'll be in episode 4. Just looking at the pictures, it looks like they're going to have some time in Dragonstone, some time in Winterfell, and there might even, we'll definitely see Cersei and Euron in King's Landing. I don't know if we'll see any of the heroes or the allied forces in King's Landing. What else are we looking for? We might get some, the reason for being for Jon and Bran is a little bit uncertain at this point. Bran doesn't have his big nemesis, the Night King, anymore, as does Jon doesn't have his big nemesis, the Night King. Night King was dead, killed by Arya with the Valyrian steel dagger, came out of nowhere and got him. So the big question is, like, Dany's and the allied armies seem to be pretty depleted after the war with the Whites and the White Walkers and the Night King, and so the question is, how are they gonna rally enough forces to take over King's Landing? And that's a big question. The other thing is that I think it's pretty clear from the trailer that there are three big stars that are missing from the trailer. That's Pod, Jaime, and Brienne. Right? I did not see any Pod, Jaime, or Brienne in that trailer. We know from episode 3 they did live. There was a shot of them that they were still fighting and alive right before the Night King was killed. So they wouldn't waste their deaths by not showing them to us. So they are definitely alive and well. But where are they? Why don't we see them in the episode? Maybe they're not that important, but I kind of think they are. Jaime never pledged allegiance to Dany or Jon. He just pledged allegiance to the living. Now that the dead are gone, is he going to go back to King's Landing and work on Cersei, be part of Cersei's guard? Is he going to continue to lead the Lannister armies, or what's left of the Queen's armies? Is that his plan? He's just going to go back on a horse down the King's Road and then give all the breakdown of what he learned about the Allied armies? I don't know. My guess is kind of no. There was that nasty exchange there was kind of a weird exchange between him and the gods with Bran, who obviously knows that he was crippled by Jaime, and that exchange seemed to indicate that, well, Bran thought he was going to die, so it didn't really matter, but there was definitely some tension there. And then, Pod and Brienne, where are they? Are they going to stick around in Winterfell? Is really Brienne? To me, it feels like she's kind of served her pledge to Sansa's mother, Catelyn Stark. So it's kind of been a long time. She's the War of the Five Kings is over. And I guess maybe she's pledged for life. I don't know. So that's a good question. Let's see. I heard a theory from the Storm of Spoilers podcast, and I really did not think it was sourced very well. They were sourcing this kind of anonymous source that had supposedly been discredited since. And the theory seemed to make more sense based on the Night King still being around. And so I don't know that it's a theory. It's supposed to be a production leak. But this supposed production leak, which I am pretty skeptical about, says that the King's Landing is going to be blown up. Maybe not in the next episode, but in a upcoming episode, say 5 or 6, and Tyrion is going to be responsible for that. He's going to light the wildfire in King's Landing, and then he's going to be executed at the end of the series for that. I don't know. I kind of think that just is kind of a bogus spoiler there. A bogus production leak. That would be my reaction to it. because it made more sense when it was like he would be killing the White Walkers with that. It makes less sense that he's just the mad hand doing that. The I thought the best source that the Storm of Spoilers did say was that there's this idea I certainly held it was that the trailers did not go past episode 3 in terms of the pre-season trailers, but that's not entirely true. There is a trailer episode that goes back to part of the trailer shows a picture of the Tyrion looking up at a dragon, and they were positing that was before he gets executed by dragon fire, like the Sam's family did. But I don't know. And so that was like one of the few views, and there was also a picture of Dany in the dragon pit. The other thing I kind of came across that was interesting this week was there was a, how do I say it? The visions that Dany had in the House of Undying. We have like Bran's vision of the dragon over King's Landing, but the vision of the snow and the throne room and it all blown up. The background of that vision has a 7-pointed star, and the throne room currently has a Lannister lion in it. So okay, so sorry about that. We're back now. It's also possible that they just didn't really anticipate that they would have gotten rid of the 7-pointed star. So it's just not. It's possible that the 7-pointed star. Dan and Dave just didn't realize they were going to blow up the Septa Baylor, and the whole plot of that entire plot that they had with the blowing up of the Septa Baylor to get rid of the High Sparrow and the Tyrells. They just had not anticipated that yet. So but that does indicate, is that a vision in the past? Is it a kind of theoretical vision, right? So is it like snow? Is that Jon Snow? Maybe it's not going to snow in King's Landing. It's just that Jon Snow's going to take the throne, and he's going to blow it up or something, and Dany's just not going to take the throne. Is that what they're indicating by that? I don't know. It could, I think Azor Ahai really didn't make much sense in terms of Arya. Right, so the Azor Ahai prophecy has and I guess they really only talked about the prince that was promised. And who talked about the prophecy? There was only really one person. Maybe there was another Red Priestess that talked about it. But Azor Ahai says that the person that's going to save the world is going to bring dragons from stone, or the prince that was promised prophecy. That's obviously Dany. Nobody else has done that. But Dany didn't kill the Night King, and then there's this whole thing about Lightbringer. Arya's dagger does not seem like the sword Lightbringer. It doesn't glow. It wasn't really tested in water. It really wasn't tested in the heart of a lion, and it was not tested in the hero or prince that was promised the heart of his or her lover. If you're thinking that the Valerian is gender neutral, so that the dagger was not stabbed in any lover of Arya's. So, and it didn't glow. So I don't think it was Lightbringer. I don't think the prophecies come true. And you remember that Melisandre always was making bad prophecy and burning people for no reason and stuff like that. So maybe they just ignore it. I think they're going to ignore it. I think that's the most likely scenario, that Dan and Dave are just going to ignore the Azor Ahai prophecy or the prince that was promised. And if you want to think about it, hey, Melisandre's often wrong. She made some mistakes. She made a mistake about Stannis, and she made a mistake about Stannis' daughter for sure. And so that's why the Onion Knight wanted to kill her if she didn't kill herself. So bye bye Melisandre and your prophecies. So is the throne room gonna be blown up like that? Who's gonna blow it up? If you trust the Storm of Spoilers production leak, that's gonna be blown up by Tyrion. I don't believe that, to be honest. I think it is likely that they're going to have all kinds of the ballistas or scorpions to protect King's Landing. Rhaegal is going to be back. Drogon's going to be back. Rhaegal has a big hole in his wing. Is probably a lot more beat up than Drogon is, but he's still flying. And I think the real thing is that we got all these people that have snuck into King's Landing. I think that what would make sense to me is that Arya and the Hound and maybe Gendry or the Onion Knight all go in. They're all pretty familiar with that deal. Also, Varys and Tyrion are also pretty familiar with sneaking into King's Landing, and they go on an assassination attempt. But I don't think that's the only person that could possibly assassinate Cersei. That Cersei also has to worry about Euron. He's not a very trustworthy character either, and I wouldn't put it past that he would kill her. Now, I think the Maggie the Frog prophecy didn't talk about how she was going to die, but she was supposed to die by the Valonqar, and that was like a younger sibling, but it doesn't necessarily mean her younger sibling. Both her siblings, Jaime and Tyrion, are younger siblings, but Euron is also a younger sibling. Balon was his older brother. So, Arya is a younger sibling. She was not the oldest of the Stark children. So I don't think it has to, even if they care about that prophecy, which I suspect they do not. It was a pretty vague one that Cersei would be killed by a Valonqar. And what is a Valonqar? A younger sibling, but not necessarily your own. So that's a pretty easy one to fill, even if Dan and Dave are not trying. So incidentally, I guess Dan and Dave, once they're done with this Game of Thrones stuff, which I assume they're pretty much done with now, is that they're going to go off and make the next Star Wars trilogy for Disney, I guess. So they're off to, I guess, bigger and better things. I don't know. They'll be writing some more stories of epic stories of good and evil uh, in the movies. Okay, so let me know who you think's gonna win the throne. You know, I guess the other thing, Sansa and John. So John really bumped up the his odds on the U.S. bookie markets have really jumped up to 30% after he survived the Night King, and it seems like he's favored by American gamblers. But Sansa is the favorite, and a close second is Bran, whereas Bran's kind of a distant challenger for the throne in the 10% range. But he's a lot closer in terms of the UK odds, and I just think that the UK bettors have a better beat on this because they spent more time in Northern Ireland than they did in the US. So my guess would be that those odds are better. I suspect you couldn't do some locational arbitrage between those odds. For instance, I, as an American, can't get to the odd sites for William Hill. I've only been able to see them in news articles. So it might be somewhat challenging to try to arbitrage those odds. But I suspect they can't be arbitraged because the spreads are so high in the 60% range. I don't recommend gambling. I just look at them just to get an idea of what is likely and what is not. But it seems like there's not a strong consensus even still. All right, I'm going to stop talking now. I will probably have a big live stream on the day, probably. So 2 days ago until episode 4 of Game of Thrones. Subscribe to Linus Wilson and hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next video.